Welcome everybody to the Heritage Matters webinar. And this is our sixth webinar. It's an international partnership, the webinar with several organizations, hosted by the International Center for Inclusive Cultural Leadership at Anant National University in Ahmedabad, India. And we're very pleased that UNESCO Resili Art is a partner, and so also International Institute for Inclusive Museum, Common Ground, Research Networks from Champaign-Urbana, and I hope I haven't forgotten anybody else, but there's quite a few partners for us. And so Heritage Matters, and then the theme today is Subaltern Narratives and Dalit Creative Engagement. Now, somebody might ask the question, you're saying subaltern, you're saying Dalit, creativity, what's that got to do with heritage? And I want to be very clear that we are not talking about heritage in the colonial sense or the archaic sense of antiquities, monuments, and sites, objects. We're talking about heritage as something that's perceived, understood, and interpreted from the present. So our present day cultures actually determine how we interpret and understand heritage. So in that context, there are no boundaries of tangible and intangible, movable and immovable, natural and cultural. These are all boundaries for administrative purposes. We don't use them. We take a total approach to heritage. And in taking that total approach, I want to say that intangible heritage, the whole range of things, songs, traditions, theater, environment, the way we perceive the environment, dance, all these things, they come under intangible heritage. However, there are aspects of intangible heritage that are not, something we want to safeguard, something we want to, look after for future generations, because not all intangible heritage is good. And one of those not good intangible heritage is the rationale and the rituals and the ritualistic nature of caste system, for example, in India, or racism in United States, even though it's a historical structure of, master-slave relations, which some people would say they're songs, they're all kinds of things. We don't accept that because that's structural inequality, structural racism. It's the same thing with caste in India, where the castes that are at the margins, disadvantaged and ostracized, are discriminated against on quite a lot. Historically, they've been discriminated, they still are. Now, I'll give you another example. I worked in Ethiopia when they were working on the national capacity building. I was the facilitator for safeguarding intangible heritage. People came from all the provinces and they asked me, they said, Prof, female genital mutilation is intangible heritage, is part of our community practice. Is this intangible heritage? So I set them an exercise saying that yes, you could consider it intangible heritage, but it's not a good practice of intangible heritage. It's against your constitution. It is also against the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. It is discrimination against women, but it's also violation of human rights. So it is not good intangible heritage. Caste discrimination is not good intangible heritage. Anything that allows race and discrimination, we do not accept it. So when we talk about Dalit matters, it's the same as Black Lives Matters. I mean, there are a lot of people internationally, so I'm using some comparative examples. And so Black Lives Matters and Dalit Lives Matters. So that's the reason that we've targeted this webinar. And that's what we do as an international center. We want to pick up contemporary issues and engage with them. Now I want to say something as we go along. I know today is 4th of July, and a lot of people on WhatsApp groups are sending happy 4th of July day. I mean, they haven't heard about Black Lives Matters, obviously, But that's not the reason why we're doing it here. It's not. It's got nothing to do with United States. Uh, i- Today is a very special day. If you're familiar with Buddhism, today is the day, 4th of July, what we call Dharma Chakra Parvatana. That is Buddha turning the wheel of Dharma in Sarnath 2,600 years ago. So there are very big celebrations by the International Buddhist Federation around the world to recognize and honor, Buddha's first sermon in Sarnath near Benares. So it's very important for us for that. But it's also important for us because it's the death anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, who is one of our great philosophers in India. And he's the one who famously gave the speech in the Chicago International Conference on World Religions that the poor ask us for food, shelter, and clothes. And what we give them ideas of freedom, liberty, and all these things. They're like stones. Uh, People are asking for livelihood. So that is livelihood is real freedom. So that is Swami Vivekananda. And also, I come from a state of Andhra Pradesh. I'm Telugu speaking. I'm an Andhra person. I was born, brought up, educated there, and I've moved back to work there. Today is a very important day because it's the day that the British brutally murdered or assassinated Alluri Sitaramaraju, who was a very famous freedom fighter against the British and led the tribal groups against the British. And he was invited into the tent of the British local officer to negotiate peace accord. When he entered the tent, he was shot dead. So much for British justice towards the tribal people of India. And today is Alluri Sitaramaraju's death anniversary, and we celebrate that in the name of freedom. So we're talking about freedom for disadvantaged groups, freedom for tribal people, freedom for caste groups that are discriminated, freedom for racial groups that are discriminated against around the world. We're talking about discrimination against Aboriginal people in Australia, discrimination against African Americans in the US, discrimination against First Nations in Canada, uh, around the world, any form of discrimination. So what is the role of culture and creativity, in dealing with this? That's why we have, first, we have a very well-known playwright, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar. Most of you would have Googled our speakers, which is what is done. And you've also got an email, which gives their background for you. So I'm not going to repeat it here, take up their valuable time. So Dr. Vizai Bhaskar is a playwright, and he's an activist in many ways, advocating, for the rights of people who are disadvantaged. And he has started what is called Suta Rangastale. This is a theatrical rejuvenation movement, and which includes classes for people to empower themselves, to express themselves, to fight for their cultural rights, so that they participate as equals in the society. And then we have Professor Swaroopa Rani. She's in the Center for Buddhist Studies at the Acharya Nagarjuna University. She's published extensively essays, books, poetry, volumes. But her main thing that she wants to focus on today is disadvantage, Dalit, and gender, about women and girls. SDG 5, those of you are familiar with Sustainable Development Goals, that's what she wants to focus on. Once the two panelists have spoken, exactly 8 minutes each, and then we have a very special guest, Shri Praveen Kumar. He's the Special Chief Secretary of the state of Andhra Pradesh. That means he's one of the most powerful people in that state. But he's the Special Chief Secretary for BC advancement. BC means the disadvantaged communities, backward castes as they're called officially. They're backward economically, but culturally they're very rich. They're disadvantaged economically, but they're culturally very rich. And he's the Special Chief Secretary, so he's going to then reflect on what's been said and also bring in his own perspectives, with his understanding of government, which He's one of the senior most experienced people. So that's the routine. And then after that, we'll have nearly 1 hour of questions and answers. And so please, follow the protocols in the chat room. And please post your questions after the speakers, the panelists have spoken, in the question and answer box. Now let's kickstart the evening. Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, over to you.
Good evening, Professor Amareswar Galla and other panelists.
And you got a lot of participants too.
And participants also.
From
Good
all
evening,
over the world.
Hello. Good evening to Praveen Kumar garu, Swaroopa Rani garu, and other participants in the webinar across the globe. Amareswar Galla ji, you have sufficiently enlightened and thrown light on the subject that why the customs, traditions, cultural manifestations will become part of the heritage, which is specially termed as intangible heritage. I don't want to mention specifically again about that, but I straight away go into the topic. What is subaltern literature and what is Dalit literature? So let me start with first a few lines, few introductory lines about subaltern literature. It can be defined as the literature of marginalized communities, lower classes, and neglected groups, and also regions, which did not find place in the mainstream of literature. This is otherwise called as fourth world literature also. So the suppression, the suppressed voices hitherto, which have not figured in the elite literature, is called subaltern literature. You all know. But this subaltern literature recently have gained momentum, covering the rest of the society which is ignored. It happened in all cultures and in all languages that literature started describing the lifestyle of gods and demigods, then lowering down to emperors, kings, and later on the next level of landlords and jamindars. And afterwards, it touched the life of middle class people. And now it is the turn of the lower rung of the society. The washerman, the barber, a rickshaw puller, this type of life, which is actually the basic foundation of life, the society, now getting figured, delineated in the literature in various aspects. This is a sign all over the world. It also happened in Telugu literature also. So coming to the Dalit literature. First of all, let me explain for the benefit of the foreign participants. They may not be aware what a Dalit means. So the general meaning of Dalit word is broken or divided. But in Indian context, in the Hindu religious context, it speaks volumes of insult, of ill treatment, of indignation about a group of people who are originally the sons of the soil, who are the natives of this land, this country. It is surprising for others because it has become practice of India, and being Indians, we do come over. Every day we experience this type of treatment and it becomes normal for us. But a person, a visitor who comes from outside, it will be surprising and astonishing for them, or him, if he happens to see the lifestyle of a Dalit or the plight of a Dalit. He is an outcast. He is not allowed to live along with other people who belong to the different occupations or different strata of life. He was only allowed to live outside the main village. He was not allowed to fetch the water from the common source. Sometimes they were provided separate water sources. And these unfortunate people used to walk miles and miles to get a pot of water. They were prohibited from acquiring properties. They were prohibited from possessing gold or wealth. Education was denied to them. If at all, an enthusiastic young Dalit happens to hear some scriptures or some slokas or some poems, molten lead was poured into his ears. He was not permitted to go into the temple and to pray God, even though his mind, body, soul, everything is filled with devotion. If at all he wants to pray the God, he has to do it by standing outside only. And while coming to the temple, he should not come into the way of anybody and keeping himself from a distance. He is not allowed to go near proximity of other people who belong to the upper communities. So education is denied, property is denied, all human rights were denied to him, including human dignity. He was not allowed to walk on the main roads. If at all he comes out of his house, house means not a house, big house, hut, literally hut. He has to wear a palm leaf to his waist and a mud pot to his mouth. The reason for these arrangements is his footprints will be erased by the palm leaf and his putam will be collected in the pot. Both these things will spoil the purity of the village or the elders. So all these things are customary, all these things were traditions imposed on a Dalit. This unfortunate situation continued not for a decade or for a century, ages after ages, ages after ages. This was continued till India got independence. After independence, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the incarnation of the God, has come onto this land in the name of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee. Under Article 17, he made a provision for the abolition of this brutal, cruel practice of untouchability, for which this poor Dalit was subjected to till the independence on books, and it is continuing here and there. It is not totally abolished. Now, he has provided certain provisions in the Constitution under Article 15 and 16 for reservations in the employments and in the political seats. Now a new era, what Baba Saheb Ambedkar called, it is now time of contradictions. So now the society, Indian society, is passing through these contradictions. Now, as a playwright, I have taken Dalit subjects and subaltern subjects and wrote dramas like Che, Barber the King, Wandering Clouds, to project the lifestyle of these Dalits, weaker sections, marginalized people in my dramas. Of course, 4 were originally written in Telugu and 2 were translated into English by Dr. Shantakumari, and others I have translated myself. So this life of contradiction, as Baba Saheb Ambedkar mentioned or described, now the society is passing, and this is a subject matter for Dalit and subaltern creative engagement. And I also, as Amareswar Galla, as in his introductory note, he remarked that I proposed a Sutarangastali, a school of theatre, to highlight the sufferings, to ventilate the agony of these people. I told in one of my articles, being ruled always, being buried forever. How long these people will continue to survive on this surface of this land without power, without position, without property, without self-esteem, without human dignity? So my plays totally, my writings totally depict the lifestyle, ventilate their aspirations for development of these communities, their aspirations, their ambitions, their agony will be projected, will be delineated in my plays. So this is the high time to ventilate more and more, to write more poems, more stories, more novels, more dramas about these unfortunate people.
Thank you, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar. Thank you very much. You beautifully explained, very, clearly explained, the whole context of it. Now, I don't want the participants to think that it's just India. I worked internationally. I chaired committees in Paris. I've seen this across the world, discrimination based on race, ethnicity, all kinds of cultural borders that we think about. The second thing is, I just want to mention very quickly, please wait to ask your questions till the end, because somebody asked a question which Dr. Vizai Bhaskar already was explaining. So wait till the panelists finish. Now over to Professor Rani.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me the opportunity. Good evening to all. Respected Professor Amareswar Galla, the coordinator of this webinar on subaltern narratives, Dalit creative engagement, and my co-speaker, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, and Shri Praveen Kumar, IAS, and other participants from different parts of the world. Good evening to you all, and Jai Bhim. So this is Challapalli Swaroopa Rani from Andhra Pradesh. So I think you know me very well. Most of you know me through Facebook or somehow. At the outset, I'm thankful to the organizers of this webinar. And my topic is caste and gender, intersectionality of caste and gender in India. So as our Dr. Vizai Bhaskar has explained, our international participants, for the convenience of our participants also, we should explain about the term Dalit. So I think already it is revealed, it is explained by our Vizai Bhaskar. And now I would like to connect, or I would like to compare the situation or identity of Dalit women with the other women from the world. So Dalit women can be compared with the Afro-American women in different parts of the world, America, and other women from different disadvantageous ethnic groups or ethnic communities in the world. So their identity and Dalit woman's identity are almost similar. Dalit woman is the Dalit, means broken. She is a Dalit among the Dalits. And among the women also, she is underprivileged. She is treated underprivileged and
Professor Rani, could you speak up, please, because it's hard to hear you.
yeah. So Dalit woman's identity. Let us discuss about Dalit woman's identity. Dalit woman is subjected to triple burden. Triple burden means she is subjected to caste discrimination, class exploitation, and gender discrimination. So that is a triple burden. So when comparing with the women from upper caste in Indian society, she is more disadvantageous. She is again treated as untouchable among the women. And when comparing with the Dalit men also, her gender is treated as underprivileged. So there is patriarchy among the Dalit community also. So she is always subjected to triple burden. So at the outside home in the society, she is treated. She has to face the discrimination in caste society. She is always most of the time Dalit woman is subjected to sexual abuse from the men of upper caste and men from different other communities are within the same community also. Sexual assault is very common towards Dalit women. And she is also the worst victim of some superstitious beliefs or superstitious practices in Indian society, like Jogini system or Basivi or Matangi, whatever the name. In different parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, we have different names. In India also, almost similar names are being used for this thing. In the name of religion, Dalit young girls are being dedicated to the temples, village deities, particularly village deities, in the name of devotion or marriage. They used to be dedicated to the god or deity of that particular village goddess, and ceremony like marriage ceremony, like it is a dramatic marriage ceremony. They arrange marriage between the young Dalit girl and the deity, existing deity of that particular village. So after that, what happens? She is treated as an object of lust by every village man, including the priest of that particular temple, village headmen, or other men of the village also. They feel that they have every right on the girl, on that particular woman. So she is always subjected to sexual exploitation. And we can see that, we can consider that there are human rights are not applicable to those Jogini women or Dalit women. And otherwise, when naturally all Dalit women, most of the Dalit women are the workers. They are from working class, solitarily. So they must go for work, like for bread earning. They are the bread earners, equally along with the men. They used to work hard in the field, like as agricultural laborers and factory workers or whatever. They must go out for their livelihood. So while getting livelihood or while they are working in the agricultural field or factory work or whatever, uh, they are subjected to sexual exploitation, sexual abuse everywhere. It is very common. And then uh, when uh, uh, when we discuss about her work also, she is being paid very less for the same work. Women are Dalit women or working class women are being paid very less. And in Telugu, it is called Adakuli. Adakuli means female wage. Female wage means for the same work, women are being paid very less. So that is also some sort of discrimination. And at domestic work also, so in villages, rural India, Dalit women they used to work at domestic places also, like in the houses of upper caste. So they used to go for work, and there also they used to be paid very less. And again, this sexual assault or abuse is common there also. Uh, and then coming to patriarchy, Dalit communities also now they have turned to patriarchal. Previously, there was no patriarchy among Dalit communities or Adivasi communities in Indian society. Later, there is they have adopted this patriarchy. Later means gradually in course of time, uh, they are imitating the patriarchal this thing, customs and traditions. So at home also, Dalit women are subjected to gender discrimination, and there is wife beating, and there is a domestic violence towards Dalit women. But generally speaking, our intellectuals, Dalit intellectuals are intellectuals from subaltern communities. They used to say that there is no patriarchy among Dalit sections. But practically, it is not true. There is patriarchy. There is gender discrimination among Dalit families also. In the Dalit families also, they are subjected to gender discrimination. Um, then scholars, generally speaking, scholars on Dalit communities are women also. Whenever they discuss about the issue of uh, Dalit, they mainly focus on Dalit men's issues, Dalit men. And when they talk about the women's question also, they speak about only women from upper caste or middle class women who belongs to upper caste. So in these two discussions, two debates, both at academic level or at general also, Dalit, Dalit woman doesn't find any space in these discussions of among the scholars or academicians or activists. Whenever they discuss about the Dalit question, they mainly focus about Dalit men. And whenever they talk about feminism or women's question also, they talk about the middle class women, their issues, their patriarchal issues, like their domestic violence, their other thing, their body politics, internal politics. So, but Dalit woman is the worst victim in social hierarchy of India. Indian social hierarchy, Dalit woman stands at the lower bottom, last step of the hierarchy, the ladder, social ladder. She has to face, she is subjected to several discriminations, several issues and challenges are there around her life, but nowhere she finds any space. Among in the discussions of caste and among the discussions of women's groups also, Dalit women doesn't find any space. And then consciousness levels wise, Dalit woman is more conscious than any other woman. Naturally, she is very conscious. Right from the beginning of our modern era, Dalit women have been they are playing role. They are participating in all people's movements and movements for human rights, movements for dignity, movements for respect. They are participating in all movements. During the time of Baba Sahib Ambedkar's uh, agitations, in the beginning of his career, he has he has organized many people's movements or street agitations. So during those, that time also, in that agitations also, Dalit women in a large number, they have played, they have participated very active, and they have received the they have received the call of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar to transform themselves or to get educated, their children, to change the age-old customs and traditions, and to change their lifestyle, dressing style, and ornaments, everything. So they received Baba Sahib's call to transform themselves, to transform their community, and to transform their society at large. So their consciousness wise, they are very conscious. And they have participated in the Dalit movement also. In Dalit movement, there are women. Many women, they played role, but they are not in leadership. There are no Dalit women leaders. Conscious wise, they are very conscious, but they are not recognized as leaders. And in women's movement also, anti-Iraq movement during 1990s, during that movements also, they have played very active role. They are beaten up by the police. They are arrested. They were kept in the jail. They are punished very severely, brutally attacked by the police and other men, including their own men. During the movement of that anti-Iraq movement, their own women, particularly Dalit, poor Dalit sections from Nellore district and other places, they are even beaten up by their own husbands. They were not allowed into the home after the agitation. They were not allowed to get into home. They said that you go and live with the police or live with the other bureaucrats. Like that, women from Dalit sections and Adivasis also, like Yanadi community, women from Yanadi community and the Chendu community in the Nalamala region also, they have they face lot of challenges in participating the anti-Iraq movement, which is Dalit women's movement. Particularly, it is generally considered as women's movement, but the sacrifice, the main role was crucial role was played by Dalit women or Adivasi women. So their consciousness levels are very high. In the political participation also, uh, in local bodies, they are provided with some reservations, but still, Dalit women are not in a position to exercise their power. They are conscious, but there are many masters around her. There are upper caste masters, and within the home also their husbands. Most of the Dalit women husbands are sarpanch, husbands of local body leaders of these local bodies at sarpanch or and this thing. Uh, they are not in a position to exercise their power, and their masters, male masters, are exercising powers. And interestingly or very strangely, uh, there are Dalit women sarpanches who did not sit on the chairs during their career of during their tenure of sarpanch. They used to they used to get their livelihood through agricultural labor, and they used to spend outside only. They occasionally the masters used to call them and get the thumb. That's it. They they don't exercise their power. They are not in a position. Even the meetings also, during the meetings also, they are supposed to sit outside and stay there only and eat there only and go out. So that is a situation of political power that is being
Thank you,
there.
Professor Rani.
So,
Thank you very much for highlighting the key issues. Now, for uh, the international participants, I just want to mention Professor Rani used the expression Adivasi. It is the same as indigenous, aboriginal words that are used internationally. So I just want you to mention that. Now, I would like to ask uh, uh, Shri Praveen Kumar, IAS, Special Chief Secretary, BC Advancement, like I explained before, BC is backward caste or disadvantaged caste. And he was also previously Special Chief Secretary for Tourism and Culture, and has got reputation as somebody who walks the talk, like action within the system, doing things that can be done. Praveenji, over to you.
Good evening, everybody, and can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, it's very nice of you to have this interaction with me. I'm very happy to meet all of you, and especially we have here with us excellent people, Professor Amareswar Galla, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, Dr. Swaroopa Rani, and so many of you participating from across the world. And I had some very interesting things to hear from the other guests. So they have touched upon some very important points. I'm going to try to confine to the 8 minutes provided to me. And so because it's very brief, it's just 8 minutes. What I'm going to talk about is can lead to a lot of discussion, and some of those questions we will cover, but in a way I can only say considering the time, it can be more like an introduction to the issues faced by Dalits and Adivasis in India. So we will talk about heritage first. And when we talk about heritage, India is blessed with so much history and heritage. It goes back thousands of years. And so when we talk about the subaltern narrative, we have to talk about Indus Valley. So we have got, as Professor Amareswar was saying, not all heritage is good. And when we talk about the subaltern narrative in India, we are talking about the Dalits and the Adivasis of India. And when we are talking about them and the discrimination faced by them, so we are talking about a community which is discriminated against. And to my knowledge, this is the last country in the world which has still not got the slaves liberated. The last one before us is South Africa. South Africa was liberated by the struggle of Nelson Mandela. After South Africa was liberated, and the blacks of South Africa could get their rights. The only country which still has not that it's slavery, but slave-like practices, a culture akin to slavery. We can't say that there is a one-to-one slave relationship everywhere, but there are also several aspects like that. So since the audience is international, we have to look at the definition, who's a Dalit. Dr. Vizai Bhaskar spoke about who is a Dalit. And so to begin, we have to talk about, in a simple way, a Dalit is a person who's treated as a slave. And so to be treated as a slave in one's own country is a very grave matter. And that is where this debate on the heritage of India with a subaltern narrative is definitely going to point to questions like, why is the Indus Valley culture identified very much with the Dalit and Adivasi natives of India? Why is it that even now, why is it neglected? Why is it not patronized? Why are the Indus Valley ruins not taken care of? Why is the Indus script still not deciphered? So the country, from a heritage point of view, we have got an enormous treasure of literature of Pali language and Prakrit. And so, but today, Pali language is not patronized, And there was a time in India where there is the culture of the Sramanas, the Charvakas, and then came the Buddhism. So there was a great oral tradition of the Sramanas, the Buddhists. They were great. The Adivasi culture of the country produced great natural medicine. But what is very important to know is that in this debate, that heritage is not only a good thing, heritage is something in some societies, in some countries, it is appropriated by others as their own and denied to the original owner. And it is also attempted to be appropriated. Sometimes it's appropriated, sometimes there's an attempt going on. So we can see that where is Pali today, where is Prakrit today, where are the oral traditions of those times? So why is only Sanskrit patronized? Why is not Pali patronized? So the cultures of the Dalit Adivasis, why were they not encouraged? So the Dalits traditionally had very good cultural features. There is community, there is caring and sharing among the community. There is protection to women. There is love of nature and protection of environment. These are the intrinsic qualities of the Dalit and Adivasi communities of India. And these are over time lost. It's also very striking that if you look at history, a great emperor like Ashoka, so there is so much ambiguity and there is not much importance given as much as it should be. So the narrative of heritage itself, you know, you can see some discrimination. Why is one narrative being discriminated against when compared to another? So there are these very interesting intellectual questions, and for those who want to go into all that, it's very, very beneficial to know those things. Intellectually, it's very satisfying to find out what happened in history. So we cannot have a one-sided history, and especially when the other side is substantial. If you look at Pali literature, it is substantial. Huge amount of ancient history is in Pali language. So about Dalits, now, so this is how, when, you know, one by one things fade into the past. So the Dalits as a class are historically as a working class, and so they are the backbone of the nation. Nothing can happen. The economy cannot thrive. People cannot prosper without the hard work and labor of the Dalits and Adivasis in every realm and every sphere. If there is agriculture, there is tremendous amount of production and success. It's because of at the heart of it is the labor of the Dalits and Adivasis. Industry, infrastructure, everything is based in India on the hard work. And unfortunately, they are not given the due reward, due recognition. Is not to talk about respect, but not even recognition. So these are the things where, you know, when Dr. Vizai Bhaskar was talking and Dr. Rani was talking, they were talking about the kind of discrimination they are facing, even though they are the people who have to be really respected and really rewarded by society. So we have here today so many related issues. And so the narrative can always be, a subaltern narrative will always throw up a new dimension. So there is a constant talk in some circles to the opposite effect. I have heard some people say Dalits and Adivasis are not productive. They do not do anything. But then, as I told you, actually it is because of them. It's just a few years ago, the government introduced a program called Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And what happened there is a lot of agricultural laborers, most of them are Dalits and Adivasis, they got some other work to do, some construction work and not the agricultural work. And then whole villages could not do agriculture farming that year. So that clearly shows the total dependence on this community for doing anything. If they go somewhere else, so that really impacts you. And recently we have seen, because of COVID, so many labor have migrated from one place to another. And once they have found something else to do and have refused to work, now it's so hard for the industry and other sectors to again get back running. So all of us should ask ourselves a question, So it's no more a question of section against section, segment against segment, because now you think about the whole picture. If you keep doing like this, one day the Dalits and Adivasis will find some resources enough to sustain themselves and they won't come to work with you. It is the total economy which will collapse. And the people who have been exploiting them will suddenly find no one to exploit and themselves will go down. So this is no way we can go into the future. We can only go into the future together as one, as Indians. We have to forget our identities as caste, as religion, as region, as language. When somebody asks you who you are, you should say, I'm an Indian. You should not say, I'm a Bengali, I'm a Gujarati. You should not say that. You should not say, I am Tamil Nadu, I am Rajasthan. No region, no language. Don't say, I am so-and-so caste. Don't say, I'm Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm Christian. Say you are Indian. So this is the problem. So if you divide yourself, one day you'll fall. So these people, they are the productive class. If you don't look after them, one day it'll hit you back. So we have seen some things like this. Then when we come to a subaltern narrative, there are, contradictory terms like this. People talk bad about reservations being given to Dalits. But let me tell you that reservations by a different name are a common practice in many, many, many countries. It's nothing new. Those people who are in other countries outside, I know that most of them would not get a chance to go there at all, but for the fact that they got something called Asian quota. If they're talking about a reservation quota being bad in India, now remember, they themselves have got a ticket to somewhere with an Asian quota. So then people talk bad about reservations. So this is a subaltern angle I'm talking about, how the subaltern response is to these things. There's an Asian quota abroad. There's a donation quota in India. Nobody talks about, people talk about the reservation quota, don't talk about the donation quota or management seats in education, what they talk about. People recently got an EBC quota, economically backward quota. The same people who are opposing the reservation quota now got an EBC quota. Then the SC, ST or other reservations are just made, just given a limit of 50%. We don't know what that 50%, how it came. But there's a 50% limit. So what does this mean? So the other 50% is already blocked for the other people. So what happens now? So there are counter arguments. So and there are, unfortunately, in the universities, there are gold medalists from the same caste as the professor who's giving it is the same caste, year after year after year, college after college after college, in university after university. So how is the, how to, people just want to say something, but unfortunately the facts, when you face them, it's just so shameful. And when we come to the issues that we face today, if you look at globally, we have Dalit Black Lives Matter as a campaign going on now in USA and across the world. And then Professor Amareswar said, Dalit Lives Matter. So there is, like recently, the case of the Cisco company in USA, where a Dalit employee is. So we are now talking about caste discrimination outside India, across say in USA. So one must think how bad it is that somebody goes to USA and there also with one so hypocritical. One side, some Indians I know, they are commenting about the racism they face from outside person, and back in the country they are practicing casteism against their own Indians, and up again in the foreign countries they're practicing casteism, and now that's like one level worse. That you are abroad, and abroad you practice casteism, making Indian group separate, and outside you go to a McDonald's somewhere, you talk about racism of the other guy. And we have got this ridiculous development of Indian associations in USA based on caste. They're caste-based organizations in USA. They're there. So now they can be there, they can have caste meetings, and they can talk about the racism of some other guy. So, but unfortunately, the United Nations recognizes casteism as equal to racism because they ruled that it is descent-based. Any descent-based discrimination can come under the racial committee. So the time is coming soon when justice will be done. So we are running out of through a natural course. Yeah, I'm about to close now. I'm going to close now. Okay. So these are a few thoughts. We want to give you the counter narrative, and these are the counter narratives about a few of the important things which I thought, time being limited, we can only treat it as a beginning. And I do welcome any opposite and divergent point of view. It's an open debate. And I hope to be learn further from all the great elite panelists here, as well as the great audience here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Praveen Kumar. I was about to say you hit the nail on something very important. The way caste is so insidious that people take it to other countries. You mentioned about, USA. I can tell you in Australia, Aboriginal people in the 1980s refused to believe that I'm Indian because I was working with them. I was running a national affirmative action program. I would camp with them, I would work with them, learn from them, like the indigenous knowledge that you mentioned among the people in India. So Aboriginal people would say, hey, come on, you're not Indian. So what do you mean I'm not Indian? I'm Indian. No, you're not, because those Indian fellows, they don't talk to us. They think we are this and that. I mean, they treat Aboriginal people very badly, mostly Indian doctors in Australia. They take these ideas of caste, color, racism from India to Australia, and then they show it on Aboriginal people. I think you universalized. I think you beautifully universalized a very, very important area. And the fact that people hide behind this notion of racism overseas. Like when these people discriminate against Aboriginal people, it should be taken to court immediately. No, but we are a successful multicultural nation, right? We don't have these issues. And so anyway, so these are the kinds of issues. I think all the three of you raised a number of issues. And I think you also touched on the whole question of appropriation. So much indigenous knowledge in India is appropriated. The indigenous knowledge of the communities at the bottom hierarchy is appropriated. Like so many of these nature cure hospitals are based on the knowledge of, the bottommost rungs of Indian society, their knowledge base. So I think you've raised that. But also talking of heritage, I was only mentioning intangible heritage. I've traveled extensively across India, And I've asked people, do you employ people from Dalit background or Aboriginal background? It's very rare. The narratives of the Dalits or the Aboriginal people are rarely mentioned in the museums unless you go to a place like Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Manav Sangrahalaya in Bhopal, which is the National Museum of Anthropology. So it's huge issues, and similar issues are there everywhere. I mean, there's so many people who are resigning. In fact, last week, people in New York, curators protested from the Guggenheim. From the Art Institute of Chicago, there were protests because of racism in the workplace. The jobs are being cut everywhere, and whose jobs are going? People of color. So the white people are keeping their jobs, and they're cutting down jobs of people of color. So this is a universal situation that we need to address. Now, I'm going to get down to checking the questions. There's somebody who asked about, a question that was already answered. Okay, there's a question to you, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar. I'm going down, there's several questions here. And it's a very interesting question. India is a democratic country. Do you think as a writer on the side of the oppressed, that means you're standing up for the rights of people, oppressed sections, the term democracy means the same to Dalits in India?
Yes, sir.
Brief answer, please.
Theoretically, it is equal to Dalits also, sir. Dalits, tribes, or backward classes, whatever it may be. But in practice, it is not so.
Yeah.
Because, as Swaroopa Rani mentioned, as I said in my previous description, Article 15 and 16 provides for reservations. Likewise, in employment, likewise, Article 330 and 331 provides reservations for political posts. But when we, to put in practice, it is not that much easy for a Dalit or a tribal or a backward people, more so in case of minority groups in backward communities. It is not easy to exercise the power. The name will be of these sections and game will be by the upper communities. Exactly on this point only, I wrote a play by name Chair. In Telugu, it is called Kuchi. So even people don't allow a sarpanch, a Dalit sarpanch, who is elected by the people, public, by virtue of his reservation for that panchayat. So the landlords in that village will make him a toy in their hands. And as Swaroopa Rani mentioned, at some places, these people are not allowed to sit on the chairs.
Yeah.
They are only...
Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, what you're basically saying is that, yes, people understand, what democracy is, but they are not allowed to participate in that democracy because of the power relations.
Yes.
And they're discriminated against.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. The next question is to Professor Swaroopa Rani. Dalit girl child education is very low in India even today. And how do you think, the expression here used is dropout girl child to schools and colleges. How do you think, I don't use the word dropout, I use the word opt out. Because dropout is very disempowering, but anyway, dropout, the girls that drop out from schools and colleges, what do you think? How do you think they could be brought back? That's the question to you, Professor Rani.
Yes. Through some bridge courses, they can get back and continue their education. There are courses, there are some organizations, they are providing this type of courses for dropout girl students or Dalit girls or Dalit children to get the education again, to get them back. Bridge
Thank
courses,
you.
sir. Bridge
So
courses.
there are interventions, there's affirmative action programs.
Yeah.
Now, to the international audience, when we use the word reservation in India, it is very similar to affirmative action or positive discrimination. Yeah, and it's more positive discrimination in India based on quotas, as Mr. Praveen Kumar explained. So the next question I'm going to skip because it's actually asking you, Professor Rani,
Sir.
to give the names of people who are writing about Dalit feminist poetry and so on. So I'm sorry that the person who asked the question, I have to skip this because this is something that can be addressed subsequently. Your question will be answered or your request will be addressed, but you'll be sent the names. Okay, another one to Professor Rani.
Yes, sir.
What are the similarities do you find between Dalit women and the Afro-American women, African-American women?
Almost similar, sir. There are Afro-American women are subjected to both racial discrimination and patriarchal gender discrimination. So same, just like that, Dalit women are also they're subjected to face all these types of. There are many dimensions of the discriminations towards the both women, black women and Dalit women. Almost similar. There may be some variations regarding racism and casteism, but still almost same.
Yeah. Well, very similar kind of all the
Very
things that you
similar, very
mentioned.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next
We Dalit
question.
extension, please. We
Yeah.
Dalit activists or Dalit women writers we are also opposing the word called feminism. Like black women writers, they are opposing. They are opposing the word feminism and suggesting some people like some Dalit black women activists. They are proposing the word womanism for that. Alice Walker.
Right.
Yeah, same. We are also opposing the word, and we are thinking over for the alternative word for feminism.
Professor Rani, do you think that, like there are all these cultural exchanges between India and other countries?
Yes.
Do you think that Indian Council for Cultural Relations, which funds these exchanges, that they should also enable exchanges between African American women and Dalit women from India? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that would bring
That
some
would be good.
solidarity, sharing of
Solidarity
ideas.
should be there, sir. Between the Dalits and other ethnic groups from different parts of the world, including Afro-Americans and some other ethnic groups from
Yeah,
different parts of the world, they must have some common platform. They must have some common program to,
absolutely.
to overcome from these types of discriminations. Because during this time of COVID and pandemics, discrimination towards the Dalits and blacks, it is being enhanced or increased day by day. So we need some international solidarity.
Right, absolutely. Now, the next question is also to you from Nigeria.
Yes.
And there you are. We got a participant from Nigeria asking you the question.
Hello. Sir.
It's wonderful. And thank you for opening our eyes about, the situation of the Dalits. All the three speakers, and thank you from Nigeria to all the three. But Professor Rani, can I have some information on the educational status of Dalits in India? And is it the appropriate approach to integrate, the education of Dalit women and non-Dalit women, in the mainstream educational system?
Sir?
Do you think it's possible to have integrated educational system for Dalits and others?
Yeah. It is possible, sir.
It's possible. It's aspirational.
Possible. Yeah. That's
Yeah. But on the ground, there's so much discrimination. It's very difficult. Now, from Bangladesh, there's a question to both. I think this question is really to Praveenji, Mr. Praveen Kumar. With the present situation of Dalits in India, with respect to sustainable development goals, what's being done? I mean, the sustainable development goals that are being addressed in India, are the Dalits being also included in those goals?
See, it's very unfortunate that these things exist, but down to the grassroots and down to where the people live, they have not reached. So there are SDGs, there are mostly, there are reports at the end of an year, in the beginning of the year. There's a book on, I will make I'll make a cryptic remark, I won't make it easy for you. I'll just say something and leave it to you to think about the answer. The SDGs are printed in a book, okay? It's a big fat book. At the end of the year, the governments at various levels, state, center, international, they again print books. This is what we have done, okay? Right. These books are big, fat, glossy, and in English.
I've seen them.
These are in English. These are not in Telugu, and there are people who can't even read Telugu. Okay? The communities you are trying to help are people who can't read English, can't read Telugu, can only speak and listen, okay? So these are books written in big fat books, which are in limited circulation, which are not even accessible to the educated Dalits and Adivasis. So by this you can know what they're doing with the SDGs. So it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. We need to really do much better. People need to know that this is my SDG and they should feel empowered that this is my right. And that's not happening, is my short answer.
Well, thank you very much. You hit the nail on the head. This is just amazing because I have carried books which are so big, so fat. This is very much like the physics textbook we used to have in high schools. It was the heaviest textbook was a physics textbook. And I can't understand the English in which it is written. And so I don't know. I think that and international organizations are doing the same thing. So there you are. That answer was to a senior colleague from Bangladesh. And here is an interesting one again to you, Mr. Praveen Kumar, that why Indian government for SC, ST reservations have this pan-India approach, on a larger scale horizon with the exclamation mark, the question comes, because these are localized. I mean, how to, given the diversity of India and the diversity of travel groups and the diversity of scheduled castes, shouldn't these be, rather than pan-India, more regional? That's the question to you.
See, there should be an interest to do justice for anybody, there should be an interest. So if you say, why is it not pan-India, why is it not something else? There should be an interest. You should not think about where you're coming from. I have to be clear about this. There is SC/ST, the rest of them we call OC. Okay?
Right.
So you should not think whether you are SC/ST, then you do only for SC/ST. If you are OC, then you do only for OC. Then the country is divided. You can't do like that. If you're SC/ST, think about both SC/ST.
Could you explain that to the international people, please?
Exactly,
OC.
exactly. If you are OC, think about OC and SC/ST both. So, I mean, the international crowd, the Dalit and Adivasis have to think about both the Dalit Adivasis and the others. Okay, the others have to think about themselves and also the Dalit Adivasis. So, so if somebody says, how do you reach all these people? Why is it such a mystery to all of you to help the poor people? If you want to do it, you can do it. It shows a lack of interest. Let me tell you something. Ambedkar is a Dalit SC leader. Ambedkar is sometimes identified with the SC/ST rights, but actually most of his life was spent fighting for all the people of India. It's not only SC/ST. Ambedkar gave you voting rights. Ambedkar gave you the irrigation dams, the water that you drink, the water that you have is the greatest agricultural nation now. It's Ambedkar who gave you the irrigation. Ambedkar gave you electricity board. Ambedkar gave you Reserve Bank of India. Ambedkar gave you Central Water Commission. So did he do it only for SC/ST? So this is the question you have to answer. See, when he is moving, he is looking at India. My country is going to become independent soon. What can I do for my country? Is what he's thinking. He's not thinking about what can I do only for SC/ST, okay?
Yeah.
But when he is on a quest for justice, he has seen that the SC/ST people's problems is a serious problem. So he addressed that problem also. Now it's
Yeah.
not at all correct. So the leaders have to be like that. They have to think about everything. So if the leaders are like that today, they are going to take care of your pan-India, everything, SC/ST. This problem should have gone, solved a long time back. Should not be lingering still in 21st century. Okay?
No, no, absolutely. You know, I mean, there are questions that are being clustered, so I hope the participants, they're listening to you, and I think you've explained very clearly. But I just want to add that in Australia too, what I experienced, and in Canada, US, if somebody is providing leadership and they happen to be from Aboriginal background or African American background, they immediately say that they are working for Aboriginal African American. I mean, like Obama, Obama worked for the whole of the US. He just didn't work for African Americans. But this is where systemic racism, immediately people are marginalized just because they belong to a community of color. So I think the example that you gave about Baba Sahib and Ambedkar is equally valid elsewhere in the world. Thank you. Now, somebody asked a question which I might answer. They want to know, are there subaltern histories, narratives from outside India being dealt with by Aboriginal Australians? The answer is emphatically yes. In fact, Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, you go on the webpage, you'll find all their publications in this area, histories and narratives, theater, poetry, a whole lot of them. Indigenous Americans, the answer is emphatically yes. Or the third one that is asked is Roma Europeans. The answer is no, because I have a personal interest in Roma Europeans, because my professor, Professor A.L. Basham, who wrote The Wonder That Was India, specialized in this area. And I followed it up. And what I found is that the Roma Europeans were discriminated against and sent to gas chambers by the Third Reich. Hitler sent them to the gas chambers. They're still discriminated against. They're still not treated as equal people in Europe. They're still if you will, Dalits of Europe. So despite all the European Union charters on cultural diversity rights and everything, the Roma Europeans, the Roma are still some of the most marginalized people in Europe. And people still treat them with the same kind of characteristics extensively, like people do, the notion of untouchability in India, towards the Dalits. It's the same thing in Europe. And, but there are no programs like in India, US, or Australia and Europe to deal with the kind of affirmative action to address this, because racism is rampant when it comes to Roma Europeans. I'm sorry for the European participants, you know what I'm saying. And I know some of the colleagues from Nordic countries would agree with me who are on this webinar. And the next question is, sorry, there's passion goals. Somebody asked, please keep your questions simple. It's easier to understand. I can't understand some of this. How can I ask the panelists? Okay, here is a question from Nigeria for you. Shri Praveen Kumarji. Is it justified to say that the Dalits of the 21st century are still being deprived from major opportunities? Are they still being exploited and they are victims? With technology, are they not empowered enough to access all opportunities of the world and to defend their rights and stop racism by alerting the masses? That's from Nigeria for you, Praveenji.
Yes, it's a good question. Can you hear me, Professor?
Yep, we can. Yeah.
Yes, it's a very good question, but it's, again, unfortunately, let's talk about we can talk about the big things also, but first of all, now I'm telling you something. It's a shocking fact. In 21st century, Dalits and Adivasis cannot enter a temple outside their capital city, not more than 30 or 40 kilometers. If you step outside your capital city, 30, 40 kilometers, anywhere in India, such a huge country, a Dalit or Adivasi can't enter a temple. And then worse than that, a Dalit or Adivasi cannot drink water from a public place today in 2020. So you're talking about, are you a victim? Yes. The Dalits and Adivasis are victims today. And that is why this is a very relevant discussion. It's a matter of shame. People can't drink water. So some of you who feel that they should know the truth, please go to a village and tell that you're a Dalit and see how you're treated just for a day. Not in your capital city, go out. And even in the capital cities, people don't get house on rent. That's again something people know. Now coming to the bigger picture, you know, the successive generations of people getting employed, and unfortunately that too not at a very high level. The positions held by Dalits and Adivasis at very high level are very, very few. They've occupied more the lower level of bureaucracy, employment, small employment, and also a little bit of the middle level. But because of this, there has been a little bit of economic empowerment, not substantially, but there's a little bit of economic empowerment because of employment. And there is also, there has been some empowerment, but there is also the case of people other than employment. If you look at education, for example, the people touched very high level. See, the intellectual caliber of the Dalits and Adivasis is extremely high, which I have personally experienced. It's amazing. And of course, the greatest example, one of the greatest examples that we have across the world is Ambedkar himself. I'm still to complete all the books he wrote. I'm still reading. So it's like, even as a reader, is such a great intellectual. So there has been some transformation. We can't deny that. There have been efforts, systemic. There have been legal and schemes for empowerment. So we have come some way. But the truth is, like I told you, how it doesn't feel good to know from any citizen that he can't drink water in a place. It doesn't happen in any other country. There's no country where a citizen of their own country is denied water. Okay, so let's look at that. I would welcome anybody who will say no, it's not so. Because in Hyderabad city, once I got this written on a public hoarding that show me a place where people can drink water and other things like this. And I gave an email ID and everything and a phone number. There's no reply till today. So many years passed now. Nobody phoned me and said, no, if what you said, saying this is wrong, I'll show you this village. There's nothing like that. So it's unfortunate that for the international audience, there are slave-like ghettos in India. Please remember, the first point I want to tell you about this is, in every village, outside the village, far away from the village, there's a special colony for the slaves called Dalits and Adivasis. Those exist in India. If you have got 600,000 villages in India, every village has got a Dalit ghetto outside, and their business is to do the work in the agricultural fields and other works for these people and live far away from them as a subordinate class of people. So this social institution exists. So let's put this debate in a context. I don't want people going into imaginary things. Okay, first look at the realities. Please look at these realities and then ask your questions. But the questions are good, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. And Praveenji, I have seen elected members of parliament who will not go into one of those, ghettos that you mentioned about outside the villages. They would stop on the road and they have to come from there onto the road. And they have to sit across the road from the elected members. They wouldn't even go in to see how they're living, what their living conditions are. And it is just shocking. I mean, somebody asked a question about democracy. There it is. Now, the next question is to Professor Rani. How did Gautam Buddha address women's rights, especially cultural rights in society?
Gautam Buddha is the first social revolutionary who has recognized women's dignity. So,
could you speak up loud, please? We can't hear you.
Gautam Buddha is the first social revolutionary who has recognized women's dignity. He has allowed women into his Sangha. So by that time, before Buddha or during that time, women are not allowed to participate in public affairs or religious rituals or whatsoever, but he has recognized women's dignity or equality, and he has given membership to women to get ritual rights. And also, Gautam Buddha is for women's empowerment. Women's empowerment means by that time, during his time, there is a king called Prasenjit. Prasen. So, Prasendi, it is written as Prasendi in Pali scriptures. So, when he gets a girl child, he felt unhappy. So, in conversation with this Prasendi or Prasenjit, Gautam Buddha explains the equality between girl child and boy. So that is the notion of Gautam Buddha towards women empowerment or gender justice.
Right, thank you. Now, there are a few other questions. We're running out of time, but there's one. I don't know where the participant is. He said that, look, you've talked about Dalit situation, but you have not talked about the creative side. And enough about it. So, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, could you address this, please? I think it's a very valid criticism of the webinar. Because I shouldn't say it's valid, because what the discrimination, the context is cultural. You know, this thing of lifting creativity out of the cultural is actually not appropriate, because, I mean, having said that, I would really appreciate it for the sake of the people who asked the question, if you could address it, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar. Give examples of the topic at hand on creative engagement.
See, for Dalits, they have specific set of cultural designing, which is now, as our Praveen Kumar sir said, they were all put to dust. What we feel culture,
Hmm.
great or noble, in their point of view, only now we are practicing, now we are adopting. But the cultural habits, for example, there are a separate set of cultural habits like depicting the history, Dalit history and Subaltern history, but they are now they are not at all practiced or taught in the schools or educational institutions. There is little scope for these things in nowadays curriculum and in the society. For example, Dalits have Jambavati Purana, and the washermen have Machaya Purana, Madel Purana. For the barbers, they have Nabika Purana. So all these things, whatever, these cultural set of practices were not in vogue at present. So whatever the dance type, Chindu Bhagavatam is there in Telangana, but less attention is paid. But whereas Kuchipudi, Bharatanatyam, other classical dances have got weightage and they are in the practicing mode. So the cultural aspect is like that, as other contribution made by these sections were not taken to the books of history. This cultural aspects were also diminished and much importance is attached to them.
Yeah, thank you. We've run out of time, but there's one question that from Toronto in Canada. In India, are there Adivasi, Dalit curators, independent successful artists, and national media representation in programming? In Canada, radio, television, museum, and galleries are actively promoting First Nations voices, although we can certainly do more. What are the equivalent activities in India? How can you create more examples? So maybe I could answer this. There are very few. I keep raising these questions. Are there Dalit curators? I'm afraid, as Mr. Praveen Kumar explained, in fact, Dalits as groups going into museums and cultural centers is very rare, unheard of in India. And so where would you get Dalit curators? Who would employ them when the elite reproduction is taking place? And it's the same thing with Adivasis, although at least there's one institution that I know, perhaps there should be far more given the population of India, the Aboriginal people, is the one in Bhopal, Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Mana Sangralaya. They do employ Adivasis, they do employ Aboriginal artists and workers, but for a country the size of India, it is a very small example that I'm able to give. And so we still got a long way to go. So, but you also got to remember one thing. When we try to compare a country like Canada, Australia, United States, or New Zealand with a country like India, it's like comparing apples and oranges. That's what I've learned, born, brought up, educated in India, going and working in Australia. Because those four countries where the indigenous people were decimated, killed, butchered basically, and have become numerical minorities, the majority, white people, are trying to establish programs. So there's a kind of benevolent multiculturalism, very embedded, but they're trying to do something with the colonial guilt. In India, it's far more complicated because the racism is so systemic, as all the three panelists have explained, and the institutions of heritage. I mean, like in the last 3 months in pandemic situation, I've attended at least about 100 webinars in India dealing with arts, culture, and heritage. Except the two that were convened by UNESCO in Delhi, none actually even mentioned, artists of Dalit background. Not one of them mentioned. None of the heritage webinars even referred to Aboriginal people. So these are highly educated people working in the heritage sector who are not even mentioning. So I'm an Australian, but I'm also of Indian background. I'm ashamed to say this. I think we'll leave it there unless there's one. I mean, there's quite a few questions coming from Africa, but a lot of them, they're all dealing with the issues, the concerns that have been addressed. Okay, one last one. Praveen, this is to you. Intergenerational improvement through education of Dalits so that they provide the leadership or they become the agency of change. Is that possible? Is that happening?
The question is a bit vague, so I wouldn't know what.
Yeah.
Exactly
Now the question is that
about.
the question is the next generation of Dalits, the younger generation, are they empowered enough through education, whatever, to provide leadership to bring about change?
See, it's more. See, it's one can't say that, but either way, I cannot say whether they are going to provide leadership or not. But one thing is, the country as a whole, it's not just that Dalits should look for emancipation of Dalits. So that is another thing. And why is that so? So this is another very interesting thing is, why are only Dalits supposed to work and save the Dalits? So is the country not serious about all its various segments, whatever it is, So maybe there is a handicapped person, maybe there is a, linguistic minority, maybe there is somebody in a forest, it doesn't matter. So the government and the country as a whole should start trying to do something, so everybody should give leadership to everybody. So, but the idea that, somebody comes from Dalits, that they produce a leader and then something happens, okay, that's fine if it happens, but then why should it be so? Why should it not be that any other person should not help them? So that is the whole thing, So as we are, my real point is, we are now in a very new, we are in 21st century with supercomputers and nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. So should we still be looking for only a Dalit leader to help Dalits and things like that? So are we going to still be in a backward age? So we have to think about, okay, how do we now get together as a nation and try to do bigger and better things? I think this whole divisiveness is holding us back from bigger things. India will become a superpower when the Dalits are liberated. That's my feeling.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
said it. And there's, I mean, this is being recorded and it'll be uploaded. So there's still quite a few people online. So one other question. I don't know who wants to answer this. What would it take to make a Black Lives Matter like a paradigm shift possible in the Indian context? Is Dalit lives matter more? Is that possible in India? And associated with that is the question, what would it take upper caste people to acknowledge that caste is the one that's, that is actually where the power is embedded. If change has to take place, that the upper caste people have to acknowledge it. Who wants to answer? I'll leave it
Shall I
open.
answer, sir? Shall I read the poem? Is it?
Yeah.
Shall I read the poem?
Sorry?
Shall I read my poem on this issue?
Please read it loud, please. Loud.
Because I didn't discuss about the literature produced by Dalit women writers. Because ours is subaltern narratives, no? I missed that, I think so. So I would like to read a poem like Black Lives Matter. Okay. Though the white shoe has been pressing my neck through the centuries, still I have been dreaming to breathe free. My dream is moving even this noisy condition. It has become my passion to dream for freedom. Who told you that white color is a combination of all colors? White means a lathi. White means a lathi. Black means a hard work. See, see, there are there is a cast that the black tar is going to be rained. There is a forecast. There is a forecast that black tar is going to be rained on your white building. My cry for breathing is reached to many, reached to many. Song of my sadness has been reached, received by many people. Song of my sadness has been received by many people. You, the pale white face, must be punished. Your last days are coming soon. Yes, the black ants of different nations have handled my dream and growing. So this is about
Thank,
the Black Lives Matter. My poem.
thank you. Dr. Vizai Bhaskar,
Sir,
you, you wrote a poem which I read um, on the so-called, I mean, there are two things that I totally criticize in India. One is this notion of a migrant. The way the media uses it is very much like, you know, migrants in an international context, especially to European and other countries, without understanding the context. The second thing is, despite any amount of awareness raising, even
yeah,
World Health Organization has stopped using it. In India, they keep using the expression social distancing.
yes, sir.
It's physical distancing. For the upper caste people, it's okay to use social distancing because that's what they do with the disadvantaged caste. But for people, for the Dalits and the Aboriginal people, social distancing means this is what's new. This has always been the case.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah. So you wrote a poem. So would you like to read it?
yeah, definitely, sir. But it is a long poem. Shall I read it? The last stanza, time permits.
Yeah, the last one, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Their pulsation created wonder worlds for you to live in. Their magical heartbeat domesticated the invincible nature and transformed it as resources. It is about the migrant laborers, whom they called migrant laborers.
Yeah.
Their veins stretched as roads, their arteries as railway tracks, their flesh and blood turned as mortar to build modern India. They are no outsiders and sojourners. They are the sons of the soil and citizens. They are national workers and nations builders. Dare not call them barely migrant workers. They are the soldiers of the service and patriots of the progress. Don't call them migrant workers. They are the national workers.
That's it. Thank you. And very much like what Mr. Praveen Kumar was saying earlier on, that it's about India, you know, sort of don't disaggregate. And but before we finish, I just want to, because there's so many comments, I'm sorry that we are not able to answer all of them. We've already gone quite a bit over time. I think that there's an issue here that the discrimination against Dalits and tribal people in India, Aboriginal people, and the, you know, the people termed as backward caste, it's a cultural discrimination. And it's a cultural agency, you know, of the upper caste that that's involved in this discrimination process. And I want to repeat that this needs to be understood and acknowledged. And the cultural institutions, I mean, the reason we wanted to focus on creativity We have a theater specialist, we have a poet, and we have a policy leader. The reason I wanted to address this in webinar is just to raise the issues. Not all the answers are here, as some people were expecting in their comments and questions. Why is that? Why is that in more than 3 months, hundreds of webinars? Why is that nobody is even mentioning Dalits? Why is that nobody is even mentioning Aboriginal people? Now, question is, had it not been for the Black Lives Matter movement, would people in the West also be raising questions about racism? You know, and I think the COVID crisis has brought a lot of issues to the forefront. And it's as we complain about lockdown, lockdown is a very good time to sit back, reflect on our lives, reflect, especially those middle class and upper middle class people, whether it's in India, United States, Europe, wherever. It's a time for reflection. It's not just India. We're just using this as an example because we're a very culturally and linguistically diverse country where there are a lot of challenges of discrimination and racism that we have to deal with. And so it's a time for reflection. It's a time to ask wherever you are, why is that? Why is that? If you're in Australia, ask the question. I go to this museum, local museum. Why is that I never see Aboriginal people in that museum? Unless there's an opening of exhibition when they are brought in, for the openings of the exhibition. Or if you go to any museum art gallery in India, why is that there are no Dalits, no Aboriginal people? Why they don't want to come there? Do they actually know that these exist? Or is it an elite discourse? Is it that rich people, the elites, doing their own cocktail parties? And I've been to a few of those in Mumbai and Delhi, and I can tell you, Hyderabad is not doing bad either. They are also getting into the cocktail culture. And so we got to ask the question, why is that? Don't expect the Dalits and Aboriginal people to ask the question. It is not their burden. The burden is on the people who are discriminating against them. So they got to ask the question. It's the same thing. I mean, I lived in Denmark for a long time. The question that I always used to ask is, where are the invert? The invert are the indigenous people, because from Greenland, they're called Greenlanders, but they're Danish citizens living in, often in very poor conditions in Copenhagen and other places. Why they're not there? Somebody asked the question about the Roma. Where are the Roma? And the one time I was working in Leiden, I negotiated with the curator to have an exhibition about the Roma in the museum. This is the Folkekunde of the what was then called National Museum of Ethnology. I still remember first week of November 2004. And Theo van Gogh, was murdered outside the Tropen Museum. The exhibition didn't happen because the Roma moved across the border. They always lived in Europe on political borders. If there's trouble in one country, they moved across the border into the next country. And so Europeans must ask the question, where are the Roma? Where are the stories about the Roma in museums in Europe in the first place? And the Roma are there everywhere. I mean, of course, some outstanding films are being made, but they're being shown in art houses. They're not shown in popular cinema. So they're highly conscientized people who watch them. And it's the same in the US, and in Canada. Until recently, you had to ask, where are the First Nations? And so I think everywhere in the world, we need to ask these questions. And since these webinars are being conducted from here, I think that, we should ask the question every time we go to a museum, art gallery, every time we go to a theater, a performance, a dance. Why is that only upper caste dance is patronized in India? And upper caste dance is called classical, but all other dance forms are called folk. Another embedded racist categorization, right? So we need to ask these questions. And I think that unless we ask the questions, changes will not take place. Unless the upper castes actually wake up and having PhDs and being professors is not good enough. That doesn't mean that they're educated. Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, an educated man who is ignorant is worse than an animal. That's what Baba Sahib Ambedkar said. I have it on my Skype account, his quotation. The educated person is far more dangerous in that sense. So I think in India we have huge issues, and so do many other countries in the world. And I want to really, really appreciate all the three panelists, Dr. Vizai Bhaskar, Professor Rani, Praveen Kumarji. I know how busy you are. You've probably got a lot of missing calls for the ministers and others trying to call you, but we really appreciate your being here, extra over the time and trying to take questions and presenting your viewpoints. But this is only a start. This is only tip of the iceberg. Those of you who were expecting among the participants in-depth answers and all those details, please bear with me. Please forgive me. This is the best I can do is kickstart a discussion. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good night.